That's the bourbon talking, Perry.
Yeah.
That's the Perry talking bourbon.
Hey everyone, couple of quick notes before we jump into this week's episode. This was recorded all the way back in October of last year before I had some of the finer things ironed out about this show, such as tips and bits or what we've been drinking. So be on the lookout for a younger and slightly more nervous Perry in terms of the structure of the show. It was still a lot of fun. I had a great conversation with Mike about bourbon collecting. I hope you enjoy it. And I wanted to plug this real quick too up front since I didn't do it at the end. We are on Patreon, of course, at patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast if you want to become a patron of the show. We have different tiers on there. We have some goals that we're trying to hit before we can do some really cool stuff. So go ahead and go check that out. And I will be seeing you next week with Curtis and Tanner. We're going to be talking about music and what kind of music we like to listen to when we're drinking bourbon. But until then, enjoy this episode. I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Is My Bourbon Podcast, the official show of This Is My Bourbon Shop, a show where we talk about all things bourbon, why it brings people together, and what makes it the spirit of Kentucky. My name is Perry. Thank you all so much for being here, and with me tonight is my friend Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Good, Perry. How are you?
Doing very well, man. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your man cave.
Yeah. Glad to have you. It's always good to have people over and drink good bourbon.
Man, there's nothing like good bourbon to spark good conversation and inspire friendships.
Yeah, I agree.
So, as per usual for This Is My Bourbon Podcast, we are going to be drinking throughout the show. Mike, what are we drinking tonight?
Well, we've got a selection, Perry. We're starting off with Old Forester 1920 Prohibition style.
One of my
115 proof. You said you'd never had it, right?
I have had it before.
Oh, you've had it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd said I hadn't had it in a while, and I'd also not had it out of a Glencairn before. Excuse me. But
yeah, the
man,
Glencairns are neat. I'm not so sure they're not a lot like the fancy wine glasses. I think it does help focus the scent a lot.
Sure.
The aroma, you know.
I lose some of the burn and the actual alcohol flavor from
really?
it. I do, yeah. I get more of the straightforward notes on it when I drink out of the Glencairn glass.
Well, I'm drinking out of just a regular tumbler, so I'll have to switch and see if I notice a difference.
Yeah, sure.
Nice.
And when we get to our review for the episode, I'm going to make sure that we're drinking out of the same glass so that we're getting some of the same
apples
notes
to apples.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, in honor of tonight's first official drink of the podcast, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Hard not to like that.
I know. It's like the golden retriever of bourbon, right? Everybody loves it. It loves
exactly. And it was such a surprise when it came out too, because their Whiskey Rose series just didn't quite live up to expectations, and then all of a sudden, the 1920 came out, and everybody was like, "Oh,
yeah,
something special is going on."
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a lot of art, you know. I mean, you set a barrel in there for a number of years, and you taste it and hope it's good, and you got the distiller's taste buds.
There's something to be said too about tradition and the tradition that went into creating this whiskey. I think, going back to the storied past of Old Forester, it being the only distiller that was open during Prohibition, and recreating that whiskey makes for something really different and really exciting. And I think that might be one of the reasons that people latched onto it so quickly. But it's also so good.
Yeah, it is. I think even if they called it, 1950, I'd still like it.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
It is kind of neat. It'd be fun to find an old bottle and see how close it is to the taste of the original batch.
Definitely. Man, that would be the dusties of dusties.
It would be, yeah, a little too dusty, I think, probably.
So, I as I usually do, I'm going to ask Mike a couple of questions on the show. And our first question is, Mike, how'd you get into bourbon, and what drew you to it as opposed to other spirits or other alcohols? And why do you find that it's important to your journey as a drinker? In the nicest way possible.
Yeah. No, I'm from Kentucky. I grew up in Lexington, so I think there is in my mind a desire to support what's a local product. It has been for hundreds of years. When I first started, I actually thought it had to be made in Kentucky to be bourbon, and I quickly learned I was incorrect and had to stop telling people that everywhere I went. But I was very proud of it, So I got into bourbon seriously. I went to an event at Liquor Barn hosted by Matt Preston, who started the Lexington Bourbon Society.
Right.
And it was sort of a little tasting. I think it's an event they do to try and drum up interest and build interest. And I really enjoyed it. I like drinking the bourbon. I mean, it's interesting to me to taste the different flavors. It's so complex. I mean, every bourbon you taste is different. Everybody tastes it a little differently. I mean, so it just sparks interesting conversations. And that social conversation I think is a really important part to me too, is the socializing. I mean, if you come on at the end of a long day and you have a cocktail to wind down, that's one thing. But something about bourbon, it's a bourbon bar. It's a different. I mean, you think about wine, and wine is it has sort of one culture associated with it. And bourbon is a much more, I think, active, sort of jovial culture. Wine people probably wouldn't say that, but sorry, wine people. But, it appealed to me. Sort of the crowd I met was a very social crowd. I liked it, and so really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Right. There's I've talked about this before with Curtis, one of the co-hosts of the podcast. There's a coolness factor with bourbon, too. Yeah.
There definitely is. I mean, collecting bourbons, I was telling you a little bit earlier before we started the show, I've got this thing about ancient H&H 10-year, and that's sort of an old 70s bourbon, and it's sort of the Rack Pack sort of coolness to it, and it's sort of, it went out of favor for a while. But
I think it's still out of favor.
Oh, do you?
I really do. I don't see a whole lot of people suggesting ancient age or really reaching for it the way that they do.
It's a bottom shelf these days.
Yeah.
For sure, it's a bottom shelf, But the old stuff's good. But you sort of, Old Charter, Old Forester, some of those,
sure.
You associate those with sort of like cool factor,
Oh, sorry, we might have hit a little bit of a discord there.
Oh, that's right.
I was talking about H&H as it is now, as opposed to the more of the dusty bottles.
Oh, right, yeah.
H&H.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. Yeah, now it's definitely bottom shelf. I mean, it's good for, I think it's a good value for its price.
Sure.
It's just not a very complex, interesting bourbon, but...
Listeners of the show will know that my favorite value bourbon is Heaven Hill 6-year bottled and bond.
Yeah, it's a lot of people's favorite. That's a good one, isn't it?
It is as close to a house bourbon as I'm ever going to get.
Yeah.
And man, the smoothness of that for a $12 bottle of bourbon, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it is. It is. It reminds me of the when I had a house bourbon before I started collecting. It was Weller Special Reserve.
Yeah.
And now, it's allocated, which is crazy. But
we won't get into that.
Yeah. That's a whole podcast in itself, isn't it?
Oh, man.
But it was available, and it was down there with the Ancient Age. It was a little bit more. It was, I think, $16, $17 a bottle, but it was great.
Good deal. So this episode is going to be mostly about bourbon collecting as opposed to bourbon drinking or having your house bar or whatever. So, Mike, why'd you really start getting into collecting? Or what made collecting more favorable to you as opposed to getting an $80 bottle of bourbon and downing it in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, there's a health consequences of downing any bottle of bourbon quickly, obviously, is something to consider for all our listeners out there. But
we're not suggesting that you do that.
No, not at all. No. It's something about my personality, I think. I've collected other things. I like having and curating a collection. I like having things that are interesting. Bourbon, my collecting has sort of run through different cycles. When I first got into it, I was very enthusiastic. I got to try this, and somebody said, oh, try this bottle, so I get that bottle, and oh, try this one, so I get that one, So I got a whole bunch of stuff and tried it, and I kind of slowly through that figured out what I liked and didn't like, and got a collection of bottles in the basement that were just stuff that I opened and got and didn't care for.
Sure.
And now it's more, I'm trying to find bourbons that, I like, that I want to try, saving them for special occasions, trying to get more unicornish, although I can't really afford the true unicorns, but, try to get them out there.
Sure.
And try and collect them. And it's just nice. I like seeing them there, and it's just a personal connection. My dad really likes Blanton's, so I have a collection of Blanton's. Blanton's is produced, there's Polish, there's straight from the barrel, there's green label, there's black label, there's silver,
Right.
there's a whole lot of variety. So they really are easy to collect in terms of, getting a lot of stuff. And I used to collect Matchbox cars when I was a kid, and, gum pack cards. Used to get the cards and stuff. So I've just kind of always been a collector,
Garbage Pail Kids.
Yeah, those kind of things. And yeah, exactly.
So as a collector, where do you find you're drawn to the most in terms of stores or locations?
Given we're in the center of Kentucky, it's bourbon country, so you would think, wow, the great bourbons are everywhere.
You would think.
Yeah. Yeah. As you implied, it's exactly the opposite, unfortunately. An example would be one of the most sought after bourbons, Weller 12, the cheap man's Pappy, is hard to find around here. It's allocated. People I've heard follow trucks and go in and buy it, or you have to know a store owner. But it's all over the place in Texas. If you talk to guys down there, it's like it flows in the streets freely, which is probably true, and that has to do with the allocation system. I mean, they just have enough liquor stores that sell enough liquor that they get a large allocation, but people just don't drink as much bourbon down there, So,
Right.
but I go to all the local shops. I'm not too much of a hunter. There's guys I know that develop a relationship with a liquor store owner. My life doesn't allow me to do that. My job doesn't allow me to have that kind of time to go and do that.
Sure.
I've camped out a few times at Liquor Barn, but that's a crazy system. So, you could have a whole podcast on that as well.
Oh, man.
But so there are groups, Lexington Bourbon Society. The guys trade there. There's other guys that I know. You kind of get, as if anything, once you get in that community, who's trading, and you got it here, Louisville, even down in Bowling Green. So there's guys that you learn that have bottles, and you kind of help each other out. You try and help out local guys.
Right. Have you ever had any luck with the lottery system of?
I have not.
bourbons?
No,
Yeah.
no. I gave up on the lottery system.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. I got real lucky last Christmas with the Pappy Holidays.
Oh,
at
wow.
Kroger, and didn't think I was gonna win, and won a bottle of the Van Winkle 12.
Wow, nice.
And it's almost gone, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's good special occasion bourbon. That's nice.
Yeah.
Actually, my wife, who's a fantastic woman, individual, actually went down to Heaven Hill when they were releasing Parker's
wow.
William Heaven Hill, and stood in line for me,
Oh.
and brought some back, and went by Willett as well and got some nice
Nice.
picks at Willett. Yeah, she's a fantastic woman, so she helps out.
Now, to speaking of the Heaven Hill exclusive releases, one of the ones that I've really grown to love is the Elijah Craig Barrel Select, which is more commonly known as the Grenade. And I actually am I owe you for introducing that to
Oh,
me.
really?
Yeah, because our mutual friend Tom Monarch, we had a bourbon night at his house a few months ago, and you sent over a couple of bourbons for us to try, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
And I had never had that before, and absolutely changed
Oh, wow, great. That's great.
my,
That's great.
my world. And I was in Bardstown a few weeks ago for the Bourbon Heritage Festival, and had to stop by Heaven Hill to pick up a couple of bottles.
They have it?
And yeah, they did.
Oh, great.
They did, surprisingly. And they had the Elijah Craig barrel proof, as well, as well. And I didn't wind up getting that, but I was in Kroger last week, and the guy who was working there goes, we got one bottle left of the barrel proof if you want it. And it was $20 less at Kroger than it was in the gift shop. And I said, bring it on.
Yeah, the gift shop, and I've been told they do that to drive business to the liquor store so that they're not seen as competing. But yeah, I've had that same experience. It's more expensive.
So are you more willing to go to liquor stores than you are gift shops? Or do you find that there's some kind of thrill almost or what's the word I'm looking for? Visceral experience that comes from, or memory that comes more from, because you go to the Maker's Distillery and you buy a bottle of Maker's Mark. It's the same bottle of Maker's Mark that you can get at the liquor barn here in town.
Well,
but how do you?
It's the same bourbon, but
yeah,
you didn't put the wax on it. I mean, I went to Maker's Mark and did the tour and put the wax on it, and I will save that bottle for a special occasion because it does have more meaning. I do like that experience. It is visceral. It's more interesting. The Heritage Bourbon Center's nice. You can read a lot of history. I like going to Willett. Willett's a love-hate thing. You want to go. Yeah, they've got great bourbon, but the way they allocate it is so random that, you might go Saturday morning and they don't have anything out, and as soon as you leave and get in your car and drive off, they'll bring something out. Apparently there's one woman who decides which bourbon's going to go out and how much and so on and so forth. So, you almost have to know somebody, and even but that's also part of the hunt. I think it is interesting. I don't wait in lines a lot anymore, but if I'm traveling for work and I'm in another city, I'll go and look and see what they have, because a lot of times they'll have something interesting there, particularly smaller towns. They'll get an allocation, even if it's just a couple of bottles, and the people there don't really have the same interest as collectors in Lexington or Louisville, Northern Kentucky. So,
well, let's take a quick break and pour our next glass.
Sounds good. Yeah, great.
If you don't mind, what do you want to go for next?
Dealer's choice. What do you want to try that you haven't had?
Well,
let's see. You want to see what we have? We'll just name it off. We got some 08 Weller Antique 107. We've got some Ancient Age. We were talking about that. Rat Pack. Maybe we go that. The Bottle and Bond Ancient Age in honor of the Rat Pack. Maybe the Rat Pack's not right. Maybe it's more the racetrack. But
are you at all a fan of Jack Daniel's?
I'm really not.
So have you had the Jack Daniel's Sinatra Select or whatever it's called?
Yeah, no, I really haven't. I haven't.
I've heard great things about it.
Have you?
I have, yeah. Surprisingly so.
I should probably give it a try. I sort of like sticking to bourbon,
Sure.
But, yeah, no, I don't. I've tried, a lot of bourbon guys also branch out into Scotch. That's like chewing on a campfire log to me. I mean,
It's like you smoked a cigar from the wrong end.
Oh, yeah. It's just like, give me some charcoal to chew on, It's just, no thank you, but. Oh, we're doing this. Yeah, right.
Yeah, please. Mike is being awfully gracious with his bourbon collection this evening.
Well, that's part of the fun of it, sharing.
Thank you so much. For those of you at home, we have a third party in the room. He's just not on mic. He's the producer of the episode. Oh, wow.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. Man. It's a very different experience on the nose. What year did you say this was from?
I really don't know. This is only the second bottle of Ancient Age I know about. I can't read. It's hard to read the glass stamp on the bottom, but.
Oh man.
But yeah, the Bottle and Bond, I think it's really mellow. It's 100 proof, but it's not very hot at all.
No, not at all. Excuse me, not at all. No, it's not hot. In very many ways, it goes down very smooth. It's extremely flavorful. It reminds me of like butterscotch candy.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. I like some Armagnacs and things, and it reminds me more of that kind of a distilled sort of liquor as opposed to bourbon. And I don't know if it's you you'd think the mash bill hasn't really changed, but you know, there's one other guy that I know who collects, who has a bottle of Bottled and Bond as well, but I've kind of searched around and put some feelers out, and not been able to get anybody that has a bottle, or they don't want to let go of it if they have it, which might be the case. Oftentimes, it's hard to get collectors to tell you what they have.
That's part of the fun of collecting.
It is. It
hoarding.
is. It is. Yeah. I hate to say it, but there's probably a little hoarder inside of every collector.
Sure.
It's just fancier than newspapers.
So. Or old bicycle tires or whatever.
Yeah, take your pick.
So, where do you find the line between collecting and hoarding?
Oh, well.
Or can you?
Yeah, I think you can. I think if had somebody tell me once that the difference between sort of just being a little anxious and being OCD is whether it keeps you from going out of the house in the morning. And I think that's kind of the same way. It's like if you got to turn the doorknob the right way and you just got to check it before you leave, okay, great. But if that keeps you from going out the door because you're worried about it so much, that's an issue. I think, I think for me there's probably a certain amount of money involved, monetary limits,
Sure.
Some of the unicorn bourbons these days can get fairly pricey, and I think just space too. I mean, I think if you can't walk into the room where your bourbon collection is, you might think about whether you're a hoarder or not.
Wall-to-wall bourbon doesn't sound terrible on paper,
right,
but in practice.
Yeah. It's when it spills out onto the floor and fills the room, And,
What do you think about Booker's raising their prices?
I don't know. Willett did the same thing a couple of years ago. It's part of the market, I think. I mean... Sure. I can't say anything about it. I mean, that they're in the business of selling bourbon. They're going to price it where they think it's fair to make a profit for themselves, and I have no problem with that, I know Willett did it because there were a lot of flippers. Willett was very reasonably priced. You could buy it, and on the secondary market, if you knew people that were interested, you could sell it for twice the price. So Willett upped the price, which really irritated people because they had a good deal going. Plus, it's fairly expensive. In Booker's, yeah. I mean, that's just part of the business. It's going to... bourbon costs more now than it did 10 years ago, and that's probably not going to change. It'll keep going up. So,
sure.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
And there are those people who say that eventually the whiskey boom, the bourbon boom is going to flatline.
I'm a believer in that. Everything cycles.
Yeah, exactly. So, in another 10, 20 years, we might see those prices come back down.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised.
We'll
people
be getting pappy at cost. It'll be sitting on liquor barn shelves.
So another question I like to ask people who are on the show is, what's your desert island bourbon? If you can choose one. Yeah. And I know that's, as we had discussed before, pretty close to what's your favorite bourbon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like to think of it as, if you had an everyday sipper, what would it be? So I'm going to repose the question.
Well, no, those are two different questions in my
mind.
Yeah. In my mind, yeah. So for the desert island, first thing I'd take would be my wife. She's not a bourbon, I realize, but that's first. So second choice would be a bourbon. And it's...
Good man, by the way.
yeah. If you're listening, Trish. I always have a hard time having one favorite, but of the bourbons that I've tasted, I'd say the John E. Fitzgerald 20-year is the best bourbon. That'd be the one if I had to pick that I'd take with me.
Is that another Heaven Hill exclusive?
Old Stitzel Weller.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was bottled under the Fitzgerald name, but yeah.
Okay.
It's Old Stitzel Weller.
Wow.
So yeah, it's delicious.
I
have one bottle for each of my son's weddings.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So,
Very cool.
It's nice. But now for daily drinker, I like the H. Taylor line, single barrel, and the small batch. And for daily drinker, I always think something that's readily available. It's not something you have to search.
Exactly.
It's not something you have to know somebody to get. It's something you can walk into a store. And those are two borderline here because you don't see them too much. But you travel to Paducah or Bowling Green, and you'll see those on the shelves at reasonably priced too. They might be a little bit above manufacturer's suggested retail, but they're pretty close. I think Eagle Rare is a good value. I mean, it's a Buffalo Trace product, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, particularly store picks. But it's around $30, a little bit less. And for that, that's a super good value bourbon. I was saying earlier, it used to be Weller before that became allocated. Weller Special Reserve. I mean, that was great, you know.
One of the real good value bourbons for me recently has been the Henry McKenna 10-year bottled and bond.
Yeah, a lot of people like that. I tried that.
Not a
It
fan?
just didn't hit my palate right.
Really?
Yeah, no, I couldn't. It's very popular, and a lot of people like it, but I
Too
just
much
couldn't.
spice for you?
A little too much heat.
Yeah.
There's I think still going on this sort of chase to the highest proof, and guys like in 140 and all the BTAC stuff's really pretty high, but I'm just not a super high, what?
140.
Oh yeah, 144 I think is the highest I've heard of. I think there was an Elijah Craig barrel proof that was 144, but to me the alcohol and the heat just burn all of the taste out of it. For me, 80, 100, we had the 115, 80 to 100 is the magic. And I've even got a little app that I'll use to cut some bourbons down that are higher proofs. It's 120. A lot of the Willets, for instance, are odd proofs because they're barrel proof, right? So I'll add water to cut it down to 80 or 90.
Sure.
Because for me, it's all about the flavor and the complexity. I like a little heat, but I'm the same about hot peppers. And I'm not the guy that's going to sit in the room and chug hot sauce to prove how tough I am. It just burns my taste buds. I like a little bit of heat. I like a little bit of spice and flavor. I don't want to eat, plain chicken sandwich on white bread, but,
Right.
I don't want to burn my taste buds either.
No mustard, no mayonnaise, nothing. Just
No, that's, man,
Ooh,
just
man.
put some cardboard in there and go. Ugh.
Oh,
You'd need a lot of bourbon
what
to
a
wash that
champ!
down.
What a champ! I'm gonna finish this off.
Yeah. It's almost got you might have described it as musty, but almost a woody aroma,
Mhm.
Which
It hasn't
which
quite
you don't-
gotten to a musty
no,
point
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
oh my goodness, that is just fantastic. Yeah, I think what you characterize as woody, I would have said earthy.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
sure.
Not like dirt necessarily, but
Right.
it's got some of those more natural or natural flavors.
Yeah,
Too,
yeah.
but-
I could see that, yeah. Yeah.
Fred Minnick's book, Bourbon Curious, is phenomenal for anybody who is just getting into the world of tasting bourbon. So if you are interested in trying to develop your palate and playing along with the conversations that we have going on the show, I highly recommend checking that out. I highly recommend checking that out, especially as kind of a starter's guide for bourbon tasting. But anyway, where are we headed next?
We talked about island bourbon, and
We did. Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
we talked about the Rat Pack cool factor of bourbon.
Yeah. So we're
Tom,
recording.
would you see if there's some snacks in there, Tom? Sorry.
This episode's producer is brought to you by Tom Monarch.
Tom Monarch snacks.
Cookies will be out in 10.
Thank you, Tom.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How far have you ever traveled for a bourbon?
How far have I traveled to specifically trade or get a bourbon? Or
Buy, sell, trade, or drink?
well, I mean, I've traveled far and drink bourbons wherever I go. So I don't know mileage. I'd have to say England is the farthest I've gone and drunk bourbon. Wonderful bar called the Scarf Bar. If you're ever there, I highly recommend it. Beautiful old Victorian, dark leather chairs. I mean, it's where you go and just sink down and have a cocktail, and you're there. You're really, really warming and comforting.
Sounds
The
awesome.
Fireplace, jazz music. I mean, it's sort of like a classic. Like we're talking about, the old cool factor. It's that.
Sure.
The farthest I've driven to find a bourbon probably it would be Paducah, but again, I look wherever I am, and we're down in Florida on vacation. I'll look there, because they'll tend to have different allocations and different distributions. I was in Vancouver and look there. It's fun for me to just go to a bar and see what they have, because And the further, I do find that the further away you get, the more popular their selections are. You know, they'll have, you know, Woodford Reserve, they'll have Maker's Mark. The Bullet now is pretty popular, but the brands that are really marketing themselves out seem to really have that coverage. And some of the stuff that you'll get, say, down at a Bluegrass Tavern or OBC Kitchen or one of the places that's local that has a much more diverse collection, you know. So, but yeah, I probably Paducah's the farthest I've gone to get a specific bourbon. It's 4 hours.
Was that you or Trish specifically?
That was me. Yeah. That was me. The farthest Trish has gone is Bardstown, so that's an hour from here about to Bardstown, probably.
Just about.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, no more than an hour and a
Yeah,
half.
a little less maybe.
On a bad day.
Here's to Trish.
Cheers.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we drinking next, Mike?
Oh well, let's see. You said let's see. We're going through. I think I'm glad to offer some things that you haven't had to try them. We'll save the Stag Junior for last because what is that? That's this bottle is my eyes are bad and the light's dark. Oh, that's not bad. That's 129.7, so that's not too hot.
No, not too bad at all.
Let's try this old Pogue.
Sure.
I'll tell you. You talk about favorite bourbons, and I guess this would be classified a unicorn, but not to me. Probably not on a lot of people's list.
Sure.
But the original Old Pogue was one of my favorite bourbons ever.
I don't know much about Old Pogue. Would you mind going a little bit into that?
Yeah, well, it's made in Maysville. It's local. It was made. Gosh, I'm trying to think back how long ago it was. Probably maybe 20 years. I can't remember. It's been some time ago. And it was a kind of it wasn't too expensive, $20, $30 a bottle. It was mid-range. It was delicious. And then they just messed up their manufacturing and ran out and had some other trouble. And I don't know the whole story about why they stopped making it. And then they brought it back, and for a while they were sourcing through one of the larger distilleries, which Smooth Ambler does that
It happens.
successfully. So that's
It
not.
happens.
I mean,
Bullet
it's
did it
like,
for
to
a
me,
long
it's
time,
no
too.
different than I think traditionally people think, well, you put the grain, the mash, everything happens, and you barrel it all in one place. I think bourbon industry is broadening and becoming more like the wine industry. So you might have somebody that only makes the juice. You might have somebody that only makes the wine. You might have somebody that does both. So I mean, it's broadening, I think. But now they're starting to produce their own juice and distill it. This is not as good as the old one. I don't know where I'd find one of those old bottles. I'm not sure there's any left. And the people that have them probably have them because they like them.
Sure.
But so that'd be probably my top unicorn would be to try and find one of those.
Well,
But I think it's impossible.
That answers the next question.
Yeah, oh yeah.
that I was going to pose to you.
Well, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to try this. I've not, as I said, I've not had Old Pogue.
Yeah, it's an old Pogue. It's 91 proof. It didn't. They sold it in limited allocations. You had to buy a case. I think they were hoping that it would take off and be more popular than it was with the collectors, and it just didn't. It just didn't take off. So I haven't seen when they're going to have their next release out. It's nicer than I remember.
You sure you don't want to keep it then?
I have another bottle.
Now, how old is that one? Do you know?
I don't.
I keep asking you to look at these bottles real closely.
Yeah, I
in
know.
dim
I've got
light.
I need to get new readers. Tom will find it. I don't know.
Is it in Braille?
No, it's usually stamped on the bottom, but that's an open bottle, so you got to be careful turning it upside down to look. But I'm getting some vanilla and the aroma in the nose.
I am too. There's a small hint of caramel in there too, but not much.
It's probably
lot
the
of
smoothest, the least hot bourbon so far. Heat on the back end.
There's kind of a what is that?
I'm getting a fair amount of oak up front with some vanilla.
I am too. There's almost an like a allspice
Oh yeah,
smell to it.
yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. Well,
What's that?
Nice.
Yeah.
well
But-
cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. Yeah. Cheers again. it's nice. It's to me, it's certainly not bad, but it doesn't have the complexity and spice of some other bourbons that I like. It has a velvety mouthfeel too.
Well, I have no complaints.
I mean, I'm talking good, better. I'm not, it's not good versus
Sure,
bad.
and I'm coming from the point of never having had Old Pope before.
Oh, yeah, right, right, yeah.
And I don't have anything other than this to compare to.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, this ain't bad.
I mean, I think it's a good bourbon. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Perhaps my comments earlier led you to think it was.
Yeah. It tastes. I might be a little bit off, but it tastes kind of like it's got a higher rye content.
It might.
Not terribly much, but it's just got enough spice on it to suggest that the rye might be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the overall sweetness of it at all.
It seems a little more viscous on the tongue to me
It
than
does.
some of the other bourbons we've had.
It does, yeah. It hangs with you for a little bit. Goodness gracious.
If they're
that
wine,
is
it'd be more
delicious.
full-bodied. I've never heard anybody
This
call
is my
them.
wine podcast.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's heard bourbon referred to as full-bodied, has it? I mean,
I don't think so either. This is my bourbon podcast exclusive coming to you.
there's a little bit
a
of
hot scoop.
almost that earthiness, almost dirt, and chocolate. Which a lot of listeners might think, why would you want to taste dirt and chocolate? But it tastes nice when it's in a bourbon.
It goes well together. For,
It does, doesn't
for
it?
whatever reason.
Don't put dirt on your chocolate bar. We're not recommending that either.
Don't mix your bourbon with dirt either.
No, that wouldn't be good either.
Mike, do you ever go for bourbons that are like one shots, or is the rarity of a production or a batch, does that appeal to you?
Not so much, not so much. Although I will collect a few things that are rare if I think it's good to have in my collection to trade. I mean, when I look at my collection, I look at it two ways. One is, I've got things that I really want to drink, got things that are interesting, and then I'll have some bourbons in there that I think are desirable. So that if somebody has something I want, I'll have something they want that maybe I'm willing to let go of. So I don't have to trade away the bourbons that I want to keep, but I've got something in my collection that allows me, to expand. So we'll do that some, but just rarity alone, no. That's why I don't go wait at the liquor bar and camp out, or go to the lotteries and that kind of stuff.
That question was posed by producer of this episode, Tom Monarch. To follow up on that, what are you normally looking for in a trade?
Fairness, I think, above all.
So nothing particular brand-wise.
Oh, brand-wise. Oh, brand-wise. Oh, sorry.
If it's morally on par, you're set. But no.
Fair
Like,
and everything.
Is there anything that you're typically looking for in a trade? Not
You
necessarily.
mean bourbons that I might want to trade for?
Yes.
Ah.
Sorry.
I mean, all the ones I'm looking for. I mean, right now I'm looking to get another Jeff 20. I've got two now. Like I said, one for each son's wedding. I'd like to have a couple more because I like it. It's $375. They're small bottles, 375 milliliters, so they're smaller bottles. So I'd trade for that. I'm looking for a cured oak. E.H. Taylor cured oak. I'd trade for that. So I'll trade for just about any of the bourbons I'm looking for.
And shameless plug: if you're interested in trading either of those to Mike, get in contact. Get in contact with the show. This is my bourbon shop at gmail.com, and we'll be happy to redirect your call.
No, thanks. That'd be great. Yeah.
We're all about connections here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything that you've that has been just kind of out of your reach in terms of trades or purchases that you still would?
Well, there's a lot out of my reach that I'd love to try. Oh yeah, all of the old Fitzgeralds. A lot of the A. Hirsch. vintage bourbon and rye, the things that are rare because they've been collected and held, and they have a lot of desirability in the collecting community, so they command a high price. People typically don't want to trade those. But yeah, I think a lot of the old Stitzel-Weller would be interesting to try. A lot of the old bourbons would be interesting to try. But those are out of my price range, and I don't have enough to trade. So
Sure.
But typically, those guys too that have them know what they are and want them, and aren't interested in trading them. So a lot of times I'll trade, like you were talking about earlier in our conversation before we started the show about going for the allocation of the 2017 birthday bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what I'll do is I don't want to stand in line, so I'll try and have something in my collection that I can trade with somebody that gets one of those, or maybe gets two, and has one and is looking for something else, so that I can trade for something like that. Because I like to try that. 2016 I thought was fantastic, a really really beautiful bourbon, really
Mm-hmm.
sweet, caramely, and nice.
Have you had the 2017 Four Roses small batch limited
I
edition
haven't.
yet?
I've been trying to get one of those, but nobody wants to trade them.
I managed to have a couple sips of it at Bourbon and Beyond, the Music and Bourbon Festival in Louisville, and I gotta say,
Good.
if I had it, I wouldn't let go of it.
Yeah, that would put you in the majority in my
So,
experience
yeah,
right now.
it was phenomenal, and from what everybody said, this has been the best release of the small batch LE
Yeah,
so far.
Yeah, before that, you have to go back to 2012 is what I hear was the really. I've not had any of that either, but I'd like to try. But that apparently was a really delicious year as well. Four Roses really has a strong following too.
It does.
Guys that love it. It's very scientific the way they've got the 10 different mash bills.
Mm-hmm.
And you can mix them and match them. And
Have you tried all of the?
I have not done a tasting. That'd be interesting to
OBS,
do.
OES,
No, I haven't tried all 10 of the different variations. But it's very
haven't-
scientific.
Yeah, I haven't tried them either, but I love the OBSO, and I had that for the first time at OBC,
Okay.
and
I've not tried all of them, but apparently they do taste very different.
They do,
The yeast
yeah.
and the different recipes.
from the couple that I've had, they
Yeah.
they do seem to be.
Yeah. I've got 2016 small batch and a Brent Elliott, but I haven't opened those because I've only got one of each. So
As a collector, do you find that there are distilleries or companies or the larger conglomerates of bourbon or the spirits world? It's not just limited to bourbon, that hike up the prices in order to raise the hype over it, even though there's nothing to show.
I don't know. I mean, that's
It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think the only one I can think. Well, I don't know if we're trying to avoid talking about different distillers and things, but I think Blood Oath by Luxco is an example of that. I think they tried to create a rare bourbon that really didn't take off, and I think, like a lot of things, you can't force it. I mean,
Sure.
Design, art, planning, whatever you take your pick. Things sort of happen in a natural way, and sometimes they spontaneously happen. Sometimes you can be like Four Roses and have 10 mash bills and be scientific as you can about it, but there's still a certain amount of nature and happenstance as to whether Bourbon Town's good enough. Was it warm?
Right.
Was it cold? This side of the rick house, that side of the rick house, so on and so forth. So you can't really force it, but I don't think it's price gouging in my mind that's the most frustrating part of collecting. The most frustrating part of collecting is the allocation and the fact that, you just can't get a hold of the bourbons. I mean, in my experience, most of the times, even if you go to like I keep saying Liquor Barn just because it's the biggest liquor store around, but you go there, you wait in line, they're not charging you more than manufacturer's retail price. So it's not really, you're not raising the price so much, but it's just so hard to find. That's what's frustrating is,
Sure.
Yeah.
The ones that I find to be the most overpriced, and there are some there's some really good bourbons in there. A couple really good ones are the Orphan barrels.
Yeah, again, that's
You
I
know,
think a
and
little bit
that's
like I was talking with Blood Oath.
Blood
The
Oath
same
falls
kind of
under that
idea.
too,
You know, there's
yeah.
some really good ones. You know, people really like Old Blowhard. And
What a name.
I know. They had to think about that,
Gifted
right?
Horse seems to be one of the favorites too.
You know, I didn't care for that.
I've actually not had it.
Yeah,
I've heard good things about
I
it.
have a bottle
except
in the
for
basement
you.
I can give you. I don't know if I've given it away. If I have a bottle in the basement, I'll let you have it. I'll go
You
look
heard it
for
here
you.
first, folks.
But yeah, I would agree. I think that's another one where they tried to create, you know, and I think, to me, if you think about Blood Oath and the Orphan Barrel series, it's really more about the story than the bourbon. You know, you think about a Buffalo Trace, you think
Sure.
about a Pappy. I mean, I remember, you know, walking in and I'm really not too smart sometimes. I shouldn't say this on the radio, but anyway, you know, it used to be Old Rip Van Winkle was in sort of a ceramic bottle and had this kind of like guy with this corn hat on, his overalls, leaning against a tree, and I'm like, it just didn't appeal to me. You know, being an architect, it didn't have that sort of panache that I thought it should have. Silly me, you know. But you know, you just can't judge a book
If
by its
only you
cover.
could go back.
Exactly, you know. But I mean, but what a great bourbon inside, right? You know, I mean, that bourbon came about because it's a great bourbon. You know, Maker's Mark. A lot of marketing, obviously, but there's a good product there too. You can't, you know. Whereas Orphan Barrel and Rhetoric seem like they're trying to create the story and then put the bourbon inside the story instead of let the story grow from a good product. You know, the good bourbon. You know.
Sure. So, are there to you not necessarily overrated, but overhyped bourbons?
Pappy. I mean, yeah, I think it's overhyped.
Only you could see the look on his face.
It's yeah, every man's got his opinion. I'm sure a lot of people disagree
Yeah.
with me. You know, people will pay, you know, a lot of money for a bottle of Pappy for their wedding or, you know, other celebration, and there's a lot of other good bourbons out there that I think aren't as sought after and therefore aren't as expensive. Michter's 10-year, wonderful bourbon.
Love Michter's
Wonderful,
10.
wonderful bourbon.
Love
You know,
Michter's
I
10.
mean, not near, but just doesn't have the hype. I mean, Michter's is more low key, you know, but they produce very good bourbons. They just don't have the marketing panache of Pappy, you know. And every company approaches it differently. So I mean, not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just,
Sure.
you know,
I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll say it as many times as you want me to. I prefer the Weller 12 to the Van Winkle 12 floppy.
oh really?
I do.
I don't know that I could say that, but
There is, and repeat listeners know that I've said this before, but for Mike, I'll say this again. There is something about the Weller 12 that just seems more flavorful to me.
mm-hmm.
Van Winkle 12 seems to have too much heat.
Mm-hmm.
The finish isn't as long. And you know, I'm going to catch flack from plenty of people, but the Weller 12 just is more interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that, you know, to me, qualifies the notion that Pappy is a little bit overrated.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, I think a little bit too, when you're saying that, what I think about is it's really a little bit like what's great about bourbon is everybody's palate's a little different.
Exactly.
And not only the drinkers, but the people that are the master distillers that are picking the barrels, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's like store picks. And Lot B is really, Pappy won't like me saying this, it's like a store pick. What I mean is that it's picked by Van Winkle, but it's the same barrel as Weller 12. Weller 12 is just not picked by Van
Exactly.
Winkle. It just comes out like it does. You know, it's picked by the master distiller. You know, and I had 2 Buffalo Trace store picks. You know, so same Buffalo Trace bourbon. They tasted completely differently. One I loved, one I thought was too hot and didn't really care for. You know, and so I think what you're seeing there is that's just one of the complexities. That's one of the great things too. You know, about bourbon, it's just very complex. It's got a little something for everybody, and you know, if you don't like hot, don't drink hot.
Sure.
You know.
This might be a little bit off topic of collecting, but do you find that store picks kind of devalue the more traditional experience of the bourbon?
No, they're almost like set into themselves. Weller Antique has a lot of store picks. Eagle Rare has a lot of store picks. There seem to be bourbons that are store picked more than others.
Knob Creek single barrel.
What's that?
Knob Creek single barrel.
Knob Creek, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Knob Creek gets picked a lot, and I don't know if that's because the producers really see that as something they want to promote and more than others.
Sure.
You don't see a lot of Four Roses store picks, although you do see some. I've got a couple actually. I've got a couple of private store picks.
Other than the Four Roses single barrel.
Yeah, that's the one that's the store pick. Yeah, right.
Store
store
picks,
picks.
yeah.
You'll see store picks of that. And so I lost my train of thought. Store picks. No, so they don't devalue the original though. Sometimes what I see is that they'll have a higher value in the community because it's like everything else. Somebody likes that particular. They'll be looking for a certain store pick of this certain bourbon. That's got a higher value because it appeals to them more.
Right.
Yeah. Like there's a NCF, which I've not had, non-chill filtered Old Weller Antique out there, which is not really a store pick. It's a little bit of a variation of that idea. It's a different type, right? Apparently, if you don't filter it, it leaves more of the solids, which leads to a cloudier bourbon, but also leads to a more complex flavor. That's really desirable now.
It leaves all those chunks of
stuff
of char. And, it makes it a little bit chewier.
I've not had one. Is it? Yeah, I can imagine though.
Well, I will say though that the chewiest bourbon I've ever had, again, was thanks to you.
Oh.
And it was that bottle of Blanton's that you sent over to Tom's house.
It was what, a 91?
91 or 93?
Yeah, it was an older one.
Like
yeah.
And,
I love older Blanton's.
I did not like this bottle.
Oh, yeah? Wow, okay.
It tasted like you licked the inside of a shoe or something.
Well.
Man, I'll never forget that. And
sorry.
And just no, it's fine. But I just remember that night, and
wow.
Tom texted you, and we're all going, This had to have been a test or a joke or something. and Tom said everybody thought it tasted bad, and you replied with, "It was in fact a test. You all passed."
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
I had to remember that. That's funny. Oh, that's funny.
The tale of oxidation.
Yeah.
So do we have one or two more before we move on to the actual review?
We've got the Stag Junior and the Old Weller Antique. I still think we got the Stag being as hot as it is. I think we ought to leave it to the last.
Sure.
Try some Old Weller.
Yeah, let's do it. And this is a Old Weller from
08 Squat.
08.
Which is a really super cool bottle. You can't see it, but I'll hold it up for our listeners. But it's I like it. It's just got a neat feel to it and shape, but something about the proportion. When you love something, it's almost intangible. I think if you could make it scientific and break it down, you wouldn't love it, right?
Sure.
Love's an ethereal thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's unquantifiable.
That makes sense.
And for those of you who can't see or don't know, this bottle is from 2008, as we had said before.
Right.
And
so what's that make it? How old is it?
That makes it 9 years old?
No.
08?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
It's 1908,
Yeah,
in which case, take it back.
No, architects are supposed to know math, aren't they? Yeah, right. Yeah. Which, of course, means it's not like a wine. It's just a 9-year-old bourbon. It's hadn't aged in the bottle.
Exactly. And sometime between the most recent rebrand of Weller in 2008, they changed their label again and the shape of their bottle, actually.
They did, yeah.
So I had never seen this this label or this bottle before in the most recent years. So when this episode drops, I'll put up a picture of this bottle on Instagram so y'all can see what it actually looks like. And if I hadn't known that it was from 2008, I would have thought that it was much older.
You know, they've got the parchment-looking label and the old script. And they've got the laurels around the WLW, the William L. Weller brand. So I think they are, I think, marketing it as, somewhat historic and old.
Sure. I will say, it doesn't smell like Weller Antique today.
Interesting.
It's got a lot.
I don't think I have any Weller Antique right now.
I should have brought my bottle.
Yeah,
I
it'd be interesting to try that.
just managed to find one a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
I called the Kroger Wine and Spirits in Richmond, and at about 4:00 in the afternoon, and they said, "Yeah, we got a couple cases of Special Reserve and a case of the Antique 107."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'll be there in 5 minutes."
How many bottles did that you have?
I just have the one bottle of the Antique.
Is that all they'd tell you?
That's all that they would sell me.
Yeah.
But I
See, that's
I managed to pick an extra one up for my dad.
Oh, nice.
So
Well, as a collector, I both appreciate that and am frustrated by it.
it's extremely frustrating.
I'm frustrated because if you want 2 bottles, you can't get it. I appreciate it because if they didn't do that, you would have guys that would follow the trucks, literally, or go, like you did, call, and they would buy it all up.
Exactly.
And then, okay.
Buy the cases.
Yeah. And that's not really, then it makes it hard to get. So what do you think of this Weller?
I haven't had a sip of it just yet, but the nose on it, it's much more floral than today's Weller, and that might be a result of some time to let it breathe.
Might be, yeah.
But
This bottle's been open probably since Sunday, so not too long. No oxidation, I don't think.
no oxidation, I would say at all, but it certainly has more on the nose than today's. So
I had a thought, but I forgot it. Must be the bourbon.
oh man,
It's a little bit hotter. It's 107 proof, which isn't
It
that
is.
high, but I think I think it's spicier than the Old Forester at 115.
it is
It's got more heat to me.
by far.
Yeah.
And this is
And isn't that interesting how the same basic product can be that different?
it is, yeah.
I mean, it's at a lower proof.
And was this back when it was still age stated at 7
Yes.
years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is, I never thought for one that I would have an age stated Weller, other than the 12-year.
Yeah.
And two, I mean,
It's got a little pepper in the end to me.
it really does.
You know, like
yeah,
a little- it's a
it
little
sits in the
peppery.
very back of the throat.
Mhm, yeah.
But man, that is the finish just keeps going.
It does stay there a while, doesn't it? It's
I'll
nice.
be tasting this tomorrow still. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's a better experience than the blends. Some things you don't want to keep tasting, Hopefully you want to keep tasting this one.
It's not that I still taste the Blantons. It's just that it haunts me.
Well, I'll have to give you some good older blends. I really like older blends.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Something
But
that
it's interesting, though, this isn't really about collecting, but it's interesting that you talk about the difference between a bottle that is freshly opened and you open it and drink it right away and you let it sit for a little while because, if you keep bourbon sealed, keep it in a cool place and out of the light, it lasts a good long time. Bottles that particularly aren't open last a good long time.
sure.
But I had the Parkers, last year's Parkers. I think it's 23 year.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think it was 23 year. Parker's Heritage, and somebody gave me a taste, and I hadn't tried it, so I tried it, and it was like you might as well stuck an oak stave in my mouth. I mean, it was like, tannic, and I was like, yeah. But then I tried one from an open bottle later. It mellowed completely.
Really?
It was much better. Yeah, I was very surprised.
Have you gone back to your bottle since then?
Oh, which bottle is that?
Last year's.
No,
Heritage?
that was a friend that had it. I don't have that one.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
have that one.
Okay.
No, it was a friend that had it that opened it. And then
Gotcha.
tried it a couple of different times. So
Sorry.
no, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, no. Parker's Heritage is, again, that's an interesting idea. I think it's a good idea. I tend not to be a huge Heaven Hill fan.
In general?
Yeah, in general. I tend to like Buffalo Trace. Probably just the mash bill and my palate. I'm not a huge Jim Beam fan either.
Jim Beam's real hit or miss for me.
Yeah. I will say I do like the older Elijah Craig, the 18, 21, 23. I do like those.
Hard
You
to
talk
pass
about
up.
rare. Tom was asking about rare bourbons. Elijah Craig 20 year.
Yeah.
Well, that would be one that would be nice to find, but that's hard to get too.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Again, I've got to send a son through college, so I won't be buying that anytime soon.
again, this is a little off the mark, but I found before Elijah Craig changed their bottle design, but it was post dropping the age statement.
Mm-hmm.
I found one of those bottles in Richmond.
Yeah.
And I believe that something has changed between then and now, because it tastes like a completely different bourbon.
Well, when they take the age statement off, that gives them a little more flexibility as to what they put in the final product, doesn't it?
And we all get a little bit more frustrated as a result.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's a business, and I understand that. I mean, they have to. I shouldn't say it. That sounds cynical. I shouldn't say it. They may be just trying to experiment with the flavor, which I think's great.
I think we're all waiting for the day that age statement comes back, though.
I think a lot of people liked it better. I think, from what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever actually had the age-stated Elijah Craig, but honestly,
the 12-year?
Yeah.
Oh.
Honestly, don't find myself craving it necessarily.
Yeah.
Because I just like Elijah Craig small batch as it is so much.
The new one I think is a nice bourbon and a very good value.
Just the regular small batch
Small
94
batch,
proof.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, it would, if it were a little bit, just a little bit cheaper, I would buy it
That's
fairly
exactly what I was
regularly.
thinking. It's not quite in my value category because of the price point.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it were $4 or $5 cheaper,
Yeah,
it'd be certainly there.
because it's what, $30 now?
I think so. Yeah.
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 I mean-
29 or 30. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, if it were $25,
Yeah. For 20, it'd be fantastic.
yeah, really, I'd be all over it.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean that doesn't detract from the quality of it
No, not
by
at all.
any means.
I mean,
It's
that
just
probably gets to your question earlier about where they're pricing them, and I'm not a marketer, so I don't know about that, but
Mhm.
it'd be nice for less expensive. I think all bourbon should be less expensive, just in theory. But
I completely agree with you. But I don't think I would ever get.
manufacturers, if you listen to the podcast, just saying.
And if they are, you probably need to stop. Man, if everything was that affordable, I don't think I'd ever be up off the floor.
Do you have kids?
I don't know.
You can have a couple kids. That'll keep that from happening.
I am married, though. Does my dog count as a kid?
No.
Yeah.
If you leave home and forget to feed your dog, it's okay. If you leave home and forget to feed your kid, that's not really good. So it's a pretty big difference.
I love my dog if she's listening to the podcast.
Dogs are great.
I love dogs. But that's way beside the point.
Yeah.
Back to the 107 real quick. Very much a different experience from.
Yeah, we should have another podcast and do like a tasting of it. We should line up different kinds of, maybe
Sure, we'll have you-
Wellers or something.
Yeah,
or,
we'll have you back for a flight fight.
12 and Lot B or something.
Yeah.
Or try it out and see.
We've done a flight fight on the show before. We did a
Flight fight, I like that.
Yeah, I adopted that phrase from Chad and Sarah of It's Bourbon Night.
Oh, nice.
Chad Perkins of
Yeah.
and Sarah
Yeah,
actually
Chad
too.
and Sarah, they're both in the Lexington Bourbon Society. Yeah. Great organization.
Love.
Short plug there.
Yeah, and we love Chad and Sarah, as we've said on the show. But their YouTube channel, It's Bourbon Night. They use the I'll attribute the coined phrase "flight fight" to them. But we did a bottled in bond budget bourbon flight fight.
Fun.
So everything was under $20. And that
fun.
was with the home base co-host of the podcast, Curtis and Tanner, where we did Evan Williams, Bottle and Bond, Very Old Barton, and Heaven Hill 6-year Bottle and Bond. And if you haven't checked that out, go and check that out. You'll be
No Old Bardstown Bottle and Bond? It's in that price range. It's under 20, I think.
I've only ever seen it for about 21.
Oh, just over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just over. So
Okay.
It just barely fell out of
Yeah.
the range for it. But
What was that Trader Joe one that you brought in?
Yeah, speaking of budget bourbons, I haven't had it in a little while, but I really did like the Trader Joe's bourbon.
Trader Joe's is a good daily drinker. If
It
you just want to
really
have it
is.
there, I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
It's nice. It's enjoyable.
It's not
terribly
overly
complex.
Yeah, I was just about to
You
say.
know, it's not overly hot, but it's a very good bourbon.
It's a 90 proof, isn't it?
I think so.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I don't remember any age statement, but
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't. 4?
It was 4.
Yeah. Which is I liked it better than Jim Beam,
Yeah.
which is 10 proofage points lower,
Yeah.
but the same age. It's cheaper than Jim Beam.
Yeah.
You know, I would be happy to have that around the house. I just haven't had it in a while.
Yeah.
But,
No, I mean, I kind of, since I collect now, you know, it's
Yeah, and
It's a
we
really
might do an episode where that's what we review at the end of the show.
that'd be interesting.
Speaking of which, I'd like to move on to our review of the. I brought in the 1792 225th anniversary bottle. We'll save the Stag Junior for off air to.
Sure. Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Sure.
But we'll be right back here in just a second. We're gonna pour our glasses of 1792 225th anniversary, and we'll be right back with you. All right, so we are back. We have poured a couple glasses of the 1792 225th anniversary bourbon. For those of you who don't know, I have actually reviewed this with its bourbon night on their YouTube channel before. It is a 10-year bourbon that came out in honor of Kentucky's 225th anniversary. It's a 92.15 proof. 92 for 1792 when Kentucky was founded, 15 for the fact that Kentucky was 15th state in the Union, or Commonwealth if you're from Kentucky and you get mad when people call us a state.
Wow, I'm learning all kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't think you were going to get...
No, but I'm a history buff, so it's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We are both drinking out of Norland glasses, which I have not. I don't think I've actually had this out of a Norland glass before. I've had it out of a rocks glass, and I
A lot
can't
of people
remember
don't
what.
like the New Orleans glass, but I like them.
I like them quite a bit. Yeah.
They have I'm a fairly big guy, so I like it a little bit better than a Glencairn in terms of fitting the hand.
Yeah. It's a very visceral kind of ergonomic experience to have the
Probably the
Norland
architect
glass,
in me.
but, yeah, exactly. Mike, what do you like about the nose on this one?
First thing I like is I love Banana Fosters, and that is just all
Yeah.
over. I mean, what a wonderful scent.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the kitchen with Banana Fosters, how can you not just jump into the frying pan? I mean, it's wonderful.
It is very fruity. I get a lot of like caramel apple
Yeah.
on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
And
It's maybe a little bit of cinnamon and vanilla.
just a hint. But
It's nice. And
yeah.
I was, before we jumped back on the air, we were talking, and I'm not a Barton's fan. But, you know, I might have found one I like. So far.
If you can find a bottle of 1792, grab it up. But I'm gonna hold back on my full review of it until we've actually had a couple swigs. And
Yeah.
So
Cheers.
cheers again. Yeah.
Yeah. Drink up.
Yes, sir.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I'll take another sip. Sorry. I forgot we weren't on TV. Don't blort your bourbon. That hurts.
Oh man,
That's really good.
it is. It's quite a bit fuller than
That's
the
good bourbon.
the
The
small
taste
batch.
changes.
Very quickly too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite a roller coaster.
The heat's fairly even, though, as it
flavors.
builds.
Yeah, it
It
doesn't. The
hit you
heat
at
doesn't
the
change
end or at
at
the
all.
front. It's very, it sort of, in my mind, builds very evenly. It's
And
very
there's
nice.
and there's not a lot of spice on it necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But the heat is fairly consistent. And again, it doesn't take away from the overall flavor
No,
of it.
no, not at all. It's very warming almost.
Yeah,
I mean, it
but-
adds to the experience, I think.
And the fruitiness that I had on the nose is consistent with the palate. I do get the more of the caramel and vanilla once I actually taste it than I did
Yeah, I
on
was
the
just thinking
nose.
caramel.
But man, I wish I had another bottle of this to have around. I'm getting close to this one being finished, and
Yeah, I know.
I threw some in my infinity bottle at home.
Oh, do you have one of those?
I do. I just started it about a month ago. For those of you who don't know what an infinity bottle is, we talked about it on the show a little bit. What you do is you take your last ounce or two of your bourbons that are laying around, and you just dump them all into one bottle. And it provides an experience that really is unlike any other in tasting bourbon.
Have you tasted your infinity bottle?
I've only got about 5 or 6 ounces in it.
Oh, okay.
So I'm waiting to add a little bit more to it before
Sure.
I dive into it.
Sure.
But I don't want to divulge the ingredients so far. But I'm looking forward to not just tasting it in the future, but also the idea of being able to pass it down to future generations.
That's
is actually
interesting.
really, really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Too. So we're getting close to wrapping up this episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I've had a lot of fun talking to Mike about collecting bourbon. We've had a lot of good tastings throughout this episode. Mike, would you recommend the 1792?
I would recommend
225th?
1792 225th.
Yeah.
And that's coming from a non-Barton fan.
Yeah.
So that's like an extra star in the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's going to be kind of hard to find nowadays. When it was gone, it was gone. But if you can find it in a bar or on a shelf somewhere, I'd definitely recommend picking it up. A lot of fruit, a lot of caramel, a very consistent spice. But yeah, this is something that I could easily go through a couple glasses of without thinking too much about.
It goes down easy.
It does.
Tastes
It does.
delicious. And to me, the taste changes every time I have another sip. You know, and the nose changes. You got a lot of bananas Fosters. I get a little bit of wood in there now.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of complexity.
Yeah, definitely. So good on good on the Barton Distillery for pumping
Yeah,
out something
good-
so good,
good
especially in commemoration of Kentucky.
Yeah.
So Mike, thank you so much for welcoming me into your home.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Glad you
it.
came. It was fun.
Thanks for being on the show. I hope to have you back.
Yeah,
in the
we'll have to do
future.
a fight flight or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, something. We'll figure out something.
It'll be a lot of fun. And thank you all so much for listening. If you want to find the show on social media, we are at My Bourbon Shop on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to reach the show on email, it's thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. If you want to find my personal accounts, I am pritter1492 on just about every platform you can find. Again, Mike, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And my name is Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.